Welcome back to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. I am Hatman, of course, and in this video, I'll be reacting to Cheavon Clarke's win, quote unquote, on the weekend over Efetobor Apochi over in the United States. There's loads of people running around calling this fight a robbery on the scorecards and what have you. We'll get to that, but first of all, I'll tell you what I saw. Cheavon Clarke normally likes to come forward and bully his opponents. He's a pressure fighter for the most part, and he attempted to do that in spots against Apochi, but for the first time in his pro career, he came up against a guy who was physically stronger than he was. And that forced him to go to plan B, which was to box and move a little bit. Not that he was running, but he was using his legs, punching off angles, and all that kind of thing. Conceding ground to Apochi. Apochi is relatively slow, crude, but very tough, very brave, aggressive, hits hard, and has immense physical strength. He imposes himself on you. Now, I was thinking early in the fight that Cheavon Clarke might struggle down the stretch because he's not used to fighting the way he was being forced to against Apochi. You see, if you've made a whole career out of fighting that way, then it's less likely to be an issue. But when you're normally the guy dictating the pace, coming forward, bullying your opponent, and now you're forced to get on your bike and your opponent is dictating the pace, chasing you around, all of a sudden a 10-round distance ain't quite so easy to do. Because there are people questioning Cheavon Clarke's gas tank after what happened in this fight. But I don't know whether it was a gas tank issue. I just think it was Apochi's style. Now, you could say that if Clarke's gas tank was better, then it would have helped him, but there is a limit when it comes to a fighter's gas tank. You can max out your gas tank at some point where it can't get any better. Now, I'm not saying that Clarke has already done that, but it's possible. As I say, with Apochi, I think it was more his style that wore Clarke down, the body shots he was hitting Clarke with. With all that being said, I thought in the early going, Clarke was still getting the better of it. He was landing more punches and nicking most of the rounds. And the CompuBox figures actually back this up. As you can see here, punches in round 1, Clarke landed 9, Apochi landed 8. Round 2, Clarke landed 14, Apochi landed 13. Number 3, Apochi actually landed more in that one, 21-19. Round 4, Clarke landed 10, Apochi 9. Round 5, Clarke 17, Apochi 12. Round 6, Clarke 17, Apochi 16. I mean, very close, don't get it twisted. There's only a punch or two in it in a lot of these rounds. But if you look at the power punch differential, you'll probably see why the rounds, at least early in the fight, were being scored to Cheavon Clarke, because he was landing more power punches, and that matters in professional boxing. So he doubled the number of power punches that Apochi landed in round 1, landed 3 more power punches than him in round 2, 4 more power punches than him in round 3, 2 more in round 4, 6 more in round 5, less in round 6, less in round 7, 14 more power punches than Apochi in round 8, 2 less than him in round 9, and 8 less than him in round 10. Now, overall, Apochi actually landed more punches over the course of the fight in total. But fights are not scored based on who lands more punches in total. They're scored round by round. And as I've just shown you, Clarke outlanded Apochi in the majority of the rounds. It's just that Apochi had some very big rounds late in the fight, like the 10th, for example, where he landed 17 punches and Clarke only landed 5. So that was obviously an Apochi round. But anyway, the way the fight unfolded, Clarke was getting the better of it in the early going. Apochi had very confident body language though, and I think that that is what has tripped a lot of people up. Because when a guy has confident body language and he's coming forward and he's sneering at his opponent, it tends to put an exclamation mark on the end of his punches. And it distracts the viewers and sometimes the judges from what his opponent is actually landing on him. I think there was a lot of that going on here. Now, Apochi was still having success, don't get it twisted. Even though Clarke was landing more power shots and whatever and more punches overall in the early going, Apochi was still dangerous in there. You could see that Clarke was uncomfortable to some extent, having to fight in a style that he's not accustomed to, not being able to be the bully in there like he usually is. You did get the sense that at some point, Apochi's going to be able to pin him down and get through with some shots that might be able to hurt him. You did get that kind of looming feeling. But ironically, it was actually Cheavon Clarke who managed to hurt Apochi first, late in the fight in round 8. Connected with a tremendous right hand, and we saw Apochi move back pretty much for the first time in the fight. Got himself out of trouble and survived the round. And Apochi was actually back on Cheavon Clarke in round 9. So he wasn't at all intimidated by what had happened in the previous round. He's definitely got a very strong will. And of course, he hurts Clarke at the end of the round. Comes out for the 10th, fighting like a man who believes he needs a knockout to get the win. And Clarke was really just fighting for survival in the 10th round more than anything. But he did make it to the final bell. A lot of people have talked about Chev Clarke's somber and dejected body language. They think that is an indication that even he thinks he lost the fight. Well, I don't know what's in Chev Clarke's head, but going back to what I said earlier on, this is a guy who's used to being the bully. The tables were turned in this fight, and all of a sudden he was the victim in that sense. Apochi was the bully. And I don't think Chev Clarke felt great about that, because his identity as a fighter, his identity in the ring was challenged in this fight. And that might account for his kind of somber demeanor after the final bell. Anyway, went to the scorecards. The first judge had it 95-95 a draw. Second judge had it 97-93 to Clarke. Third judge had it 98-92 to Chev Clarke. I'm going to break from what seems to be the general consensus here and say that I don't think it was an unfair result, Chev Clarke getting the win on points. I don't think that's unfair at all. I think that's a decent reflection of what took place in the fight. Now, when it comes to the scorecards and how wide at least one of the judges had it, do I agree with that? No. I don't agree with some of those scorecards, but the result itself, not only do I think it's fine, I think it would have been quite generous to score the fight in favor of Apochi, quite frankly. I don't think he did enough. I'm not saying it would have been a robbery if they'd given it to Apochi, but I think it would have been slightly fortunate. A draw, that's more reasonable. But if you were gonna give it to anyone, in my view, you give it to Clarke, at least by a point or two. That's just what I saw, folks. I'm no Chev Clarke fanboy. In fact, I've never really been a fan of Chev Clarke as a fighter at all. Nothing against him as a person, but I've never found him to be particularly compelling to watch. He's no Jai Opetaia, for example. Be that as it may, in this fight right here between Clarke and Apochi, I thought the result was okay. That's just my take. Give me your take in the comment section below.